Xenoblade Chronicles. I often find it difficult to put into words how I feel about this game. There is nothing else like it out there. From the wondrous environments to the stellar soundtrack, and the charismatic cast of characters, the game stands out for its unbelievable quality. Yet, I feel it goes underappreciated. The level of care that went into this game is incredible, and it's often overshadowed by the spectacles that followed. With this video, I'd like to take some time to appreciate the game. I'd like to talk about some of the things I really enjoy about it, notably the writing of several scenes. I am not going to go as heavily into the core story elements of the game, as I also won't be going into an extreme amount of detail in this video. This is more to highlight some aspects of the game that I think help it shine. So there will be some spoilers, but I will be avoiding the biggest plot twists and turns. I think I want to save that discussion for another time. There is so much to say about a lot of the bigger points in this game, but I would also like to make many comparisons and dissect the plot very heavily in a long series of videos. That would be a massive undertaking for me, so instead I thought I'd stick to a bit of a simpler approach today. With that being said, let's get into why I think Xenoblade Chronicles is so amazing. I think the best place to start is simply with the tutorial. We first learn about the creation of this world. There are two titans, the Bionis and Mechonis, that stand in an endless ocean. These two titans fought until only their husks remained, and now serve as the homes for all assortments of life. But there is still conflict eons later between those that inhabit these two titans. A war is raging between the Homs fighting for their lives and the Mechon who are attacking. The battle is fierce, and it's clear the Mechon have a distinct advantage, as the Homs can struggle to take out even a single Mechon. A retreat begins, and most run for their lives. This scene is quick, but we are viewing the retreat initially from the ground, so we can only see the soldiers' legs as they run away. A swarm of people are running from the battlefield, except for one. One person is pushing against the grain, running toward the fight. Dunban, a soldier wielding a strange but powerful sword called the Monado, rushes the Mechon and crushes them in droves. A backup team arrives with a few of his friends, and it's been ordered that they are all to retreat. However, Dunban resists, and decides they should stand and fight. His friend Dixon claims he's being injured by the Monado, but Dunban persists. They charge forward and defeat further droves of Mechon. This is where the start of the playable tutorial begins, and the player gets to fight a few enemies, learning the controls a little bit. But when we return to the cutscene, Dunban is struggling in pain. Using such a powerful sword is taking a toll on him. Dixon rushes over and saves him from a Mechon, which is when their other friend Mumkar uses the chance to run away from the fight, leaving the two to their fate, but is caught by the Mechon himself shortly after. There is a large force of Mechon advancing forward, and Dunban tells Dixon to take care of any survivors and has one last stand against the enemy. Now, why did I explain the simple tutorial in such a drawn-out way? That's because so much actually happens here. Of course it's a tutorial, so there's some learning for the player in regards to gameplay, but there is also so much character and world building done in such a small amount of time. The opening of the scene leaves no doubt of not only the strength, but also the terror of the Mechon. It's shown that 3 soldiers struggled to take down an already incapacitated Mechon, and cheered at their success, showing the difficulty of the fight. After a retreat is called, I pointed out the shot where Dunban is running against a wave of retreating soldiers. It's a quick scene, but before we even know his name, his character is at the forefront. He is the kind of person to rush toward danger, not away from it. He will stand his ground against even these formidable enemies. His confidence is of course higher because of the Monado, but it doesn't make him invincible. He can still be injured or killed, and he charges forward anyway. His actions speak volumes toward his character. Then, when Dixon and Mumkar arrive, there is more great character work. Despite an order to retreat, Dunban instead takes it as an opportunity to push forward. He refers to it as a moment to change their destinies. He is perhaps a bit hyperbolic, but it also speaks to his ambition. He wants to make an impact. He wants to change the course of history. There is also some back and forth between the 3, where Dixon calls Dunban a beast. The banter is a useful way to show that these characters have a history. All the while, Dunban is really getting hurt by using the Monado. Even though he is ambitious, he is still willing to sacrifice himself for others. I have to say it again, this is all in the tutorial. It's so dense, they didn't waste any time and accomplished so much. And yet there is even more. As Dunban goes in for his final charge, he lets out a war cry, and the camera zooms out to show that this battle was taking place on the sword of the Mechonis. This huge conflict was just a tiny spot on the sword of one of these titans. It's such a fantastic way to tease the size of the world. This game is huge. The tutorial is one of the best openings to a game I have ever seen. In a short time, it gives a general combat tutorial, builds multiple characters, sets up the general world and conflict, and teases many areas as a hook to get the player to be curious about what those vistas would be like to explore. This fantastic attention to detail and writing continues throughout the game. I wanted to put a lot of emphasis on the tutorial because this is how the game opens, and it's such a strong start. From here, I'll be jumping around a bit, but the biggest thing I'll be focusing on is the writing quality, as I believe that's the strongest part of the game. And what better place to start than the main character himself, Shulk. Shulk fits right into the standard hero's journey. He is quite smart, being a competent inventor, and tries to make new tools for the defense force of his home, Colony 9. When we meet him, he has his own lab, where he vigorously studies the Monado. But he gets swept up in his work easily, leaving him a bit lacking in social skills. He means well, but sometimes can miss on obvious social cues. Shulk, to many, is going to be a relatable character. Somebody who works hard, is a bit nerdy, and is very passionate, but also maybe has a harder time speaking to people. We start off the game seeing Shulk live his day-to-day, salvaging, having lunch at the park. The scene where Shulk and his friend Fiora are at the park is quite endearing. Fiora very clearly values his opinion, but he is oblivious to her true feelings. It's nice to see her tease him over his lack of taste, building the fact that these two have known each other for quite a while. But the scene I really want to talk about is the one with Metalface. The colony where they live is suddenly attacked by the Mechon. Dunban's injuries prevent him from being able to use the Monado again, so Shulk steps up to use it instead. Incredibly, he isn't injured by using it at all, and instead gains a powerful ability in Foresight. He gets visions of the future. Naturally, the team seem unstoppable. Not only does the Monado cut through Mechon with ease, but being able to see the future? How could somebody possibly stop you? But that immense power is quickly put in check. What good is being able to see the future when you cannot do anything about it? Despite being granted this new ability, Shulk is forced to just watch as a terrifying vision, the death of Fiora, unfolds into reality. This sets up a lot of motivation for his character. Being unable to prevent the vision here will fuel Shulk into wanting to change the future for the better and being able to save the ones he cares for. It forces him to grow as a person, and visions make him think in ways he likely never had to before. Visions in general are also a great way to utilize foreshadowing. By seeing little snippets of the future, the player is given a tease of sorts. But at the same time, there is rarely a ton of information, so it is still hard to tell what exactly will happen. That is, if it happens at all, of course. More importantly though, this scene is very solid at building the foundation of Shulk's character arc. It fuels the plot, as Fiora's death pushes them to set off to get revenge. It establishes Shulk's desire to save others and never let these things happen again. And it beautifully sets up a dangerous and powerful villain. Metalface's resistance to the Monado and overall durability immediately sets him apart from other Mechon. Even when Fiora uses a military vehicle, he is seemingly unfazed. Despite being silent through the scene, Metalface oozes personality. Initially, when the Monado fails to injure him, he wags his metal claw back at the group, as a way to belittle their efforts. When Fiora fights back but is unsuccessful, he tosses the vehicle she was in around, as if toying with his prey. All the while, there is a devilish grin on his face, implying a sense of joy out of the carnage he is causing. He is a formidable foe, and a villain you will love to hate. It's all set up so perfectly. Something else this scene establishes is just how damn good the voice acting is in this game. Shulk's screams are incredible, You can hear the pain in his voice as he calls out after Fiora has been killed.
No!
You can feel his anger when he exclaims that he will kill the Mechon.
I'll kill you!
Or this scene that takes place later, but I can't help but showcase.
Talk all you want, because those words will be your last!
And it's not just Shulk. The whole game has unbelievably good voice acting.
I swear I won't stop until I've scrapped each and every one of you!
It's something that always stood out to me, and it deserves to be mentioned. Even though I initially started out talking about Shulk, I had to talk about this one scene overall. The reason being, there is just so much detail packed into this game. This one scene accomplishes so much, and further highlights how dense the writing is. But now, let's focus back in on Shulk. Shortly after the attack, the Mechon leave. Shulk and his friend Rhine set off on a quest for revenge. But it isn't that simple. These visions present many questions. Throughout their journey, more and more visions appear. What do the visions mean? How will people react to him telling them of the events he witnesses? Can the future be changed? Or will he be unable to save the ones he cares for, and be forced to see the worst come to pass? Right after embarking on their journey, Shulk gets a vision of Rhine's death. He struggles with how to approach the situation. Was it a bad dream? How would Rhine feel or react? As the moment draws closer, Shulk becomes more and more determined to change the future, fueled by the events that took place earlier. He manages to change the future, but it's still a difficult situation to be in. Later, when the group are trying to save a child Juju from another faced Mechon, Shulk gets a similar vision. This time a soldier from another colony will be killed in battle. Despite Rhine's insistence that he speak up, Shulk struggles with the potential outcomes. These visions are only snippets of information and hard to understand. Would this person even believe him? What if he can't actually stop it from happening? What if telling the person causes the event to take place? This puts an immense weight on Shulk and continues to affect him more and more. But this also effectively tells us about him as a person. He tries to carry this burden alone. He doesn't want to get others into trouble or cause them any fear. He has so much self-doubt, unsure of what the best action is to take. When the moment comes, it is Rhine who manages to save the day. Shulk learns that it isn't all on him, and that by relying on others, great feats can be accomplished, like changing the future. Even though they manage to defeat one faced unit, Metalface appears shortly after with a battalion of them. Managing to speak now, Metalface taunts Shulk with Fiora's death. Despite his best efforts, the Monado is still unable to do much of anything. Fortunately, the team get away, but Shulk is left only more angry. Through another vision, he saw how to get the power to defeat the Mechon, and puts his focus into that. Understandably frustrated and overwhelmed with a desire for revenge, Shulk is seeking out power. Once again, this is telling us a lot about his character, and where he stands in the world. He may not make the best decisions when in pursuit of this goal. What I've been trying to highlight here is the dimensions of Shulk's character. All too often in recent times, we are given characters that are so surface level and rely on emotional beats to supplement any sort of character. He must constantly overcome very difficult situations, and doesn't always come out on top. He struggles, not just in a physical fight, but with the weight of his decisions. He must learn to trust in the people he considers close, and rely on them. We see Shulk's struggles and his growth. We see his depth in real time, and it makes him a character you can always understand. If we were to go further from here, we would have a lot more plot spoilers, so let's save that for another time. The next character I'd like to discuss is actually my favorite, Melia Antiqua. Melia is the princess of the High Entia, a people that look very much like the Homs, but with bird wings on their head. When the group initially meet her, she is on a quest to defeat a powerful beast. She presents herself as posh and proper. She speaks formally, but hides her true self. When getting back to her home of Alchemoth, she expresses grief and extreme self-doubt. She had soldiers accompanying her on her quest, and they lost their lives prior to her meeting the group. Melia believes she should be begging their families for forgiveness, and that she isn't good enough. Melia is a character that I feel many could not just sympathize with, but see themselves in her shoes. She presents herself as strong and capable, but deep down is self-conscious and unsure. Many of us likely put on a strong or happy act for those in our day-to-day, but find it much harder behind the scenes. One might not expect royalty to be lacking in such confidence, but that's why I feel her character is so great. No matter who you are, we all have our shortcomings. It doesn't help that she has such a massive weight on her shoulders, being picked as the successor to her father. She will inherit the throne and be responsible for all of her people and their well-being. That is quite the responsibility. Melia is still very kind-hearted though, and does desire to do right by her people and her friends, especially Shulk. With Shulk's passion and drive to get revenge for Fiora, Melia feels like she wouldn't be good enough, and keeps her feelings to herself. Just in her character traits, I feel Melia is a very relatable and likable character. However, what I love most about her is how she handles the challenges she is presented with. Melia, through the course of the game, is thrust into her responsibilities, as both her father and brother pass at certain points. The loss of her family is tough enough, but she isn't given much time to grieve or cope. She has to push forward. Melia has to set an example for her people, and they will be relying on her heavily in the future. Yet, despite her lack of confidence, she really is strong. She stumbles, but always gets back up. Even in her darkest moments, she never lets it stop her from doing what needs to be done. Part of that is of course since she can lean on her friends, but I think a lot of it has to do with how people underestimate themselves. We are our own worst critics. But at the end of the day, we can overcome the challenges. We can achieve greatness, and Melia is a great representation of that strength we all have. She always held her head high and became a better person for all of it. The last character I'd like to talk about before moving on to a different topic is Ricky. He is the comic relief of the group, being a huge goofball and speaking weird in his Napon speak. I was very critical of Tora and the humor in my video of the second game, so I thought I'd speak a little bit about my thoughts on how it was approached in this game. Ricky isn't high up on my list of my top characters in the game, but I still find him to be quite endearing. He is kind of thrust into the team when going on Melia's quest. He is incredibly clumsy and doesn't seem very competent. At first, I wasn't really feeling it and thought he was going to be quite forced. But then we are thrown this massive curveball. After helping Melia on her quest, the group returned to the Napon village. Ricky has been tasked with continuing to aid the group in order to pay off his debt to the village. What is his debt? Well, it's debt for food. Food for his huge family. He sets off on a dangerous quest for the sake of his family, to make sure they have food on the table. I wasn't expecting such a noble and relatable motivation from a character that was so goofy. Much later in the story, he forces the group to stop on the claim that he is tired and needs some rest. But it's noted he simply saw Melia's fatigue, and he was looking after her, knowing she wouldn't have said anything otherwise. The guy talks weird, and many of the jokes don't really land for me, but I was astonished at how they still managed to make him such a caring and great character. The humor was just that, meant to add some levity, but never got in the way of his character. I really appreciate that. I've talked a lot about the story and characters, so let's get into the gameplay now, shall we? Many may find the gameplay of Xenoblade Chronicles to be weak or boring, but I think it's handled quite nicely. There are eventually 7 total team members, but only 3 can be active at a time. Every character has their own unique talent art that emphasizes their playstyles, along with 8 ability slots that can be filled by a variety of arts they learn as they level up. At the base, things are pretty simple. For example, Ryan is a basic tank. His talent art draws aggro, or the enemy's attention, to him. He has abilities that provide defensive auras and high aggro in general. On the surface, Ryan is the standard tank that is built to hold aggro and take damage with tons of life. But Ryan also has an ability that drastically changes his playstyle. The ability Magnum Charge consumes his talent art to significantly increase the damage of his next art used. Suddenly, Ryan can push a ton of damage. Ryan, despite being a tank, actually has the hardest hitting ability in the entire game. It must be done using the chain attack system. When abilities get their beneficial effects off, like backslash hitting from behind, the party gauge will be filled. Once all 3 bars are filled, a chain attack can be utilized, giving the 3 party members a free use of an art. If an art is used with the same color as the previous, it will be amplified. After those 3 arts are used, you will sometimes be offered a quick button prompt that can grant an extra attack from the party member next in line. This is a bit random, but can happen far more reliably when the party members have a good affinity with one another, and you form team compositions focused around getting as many extra chain attack prompts as possible. Well, after so many extra attacks, and Ryan's Magnum Charge ability, he can amp himself up to deal the most damage in a single ability of any character. It takes some work to get there, but it also gives a huge payoff to people who want to put in the time and effort. Or, you can just play Ryan as a tank. The great thing is both playstyles are possible, and it's up to the player to make it as complicated as they want it to be. Aside from leveling up and getting the abilities to begin with, characters can be built however you want them from the get-go. Arts can be swapped out at any time, allowing the players to change their playstyles on the go or just adapt to a difficult encounter. I thoroughly enjoy this system. It's simple on the surface, so it's easy to jump into things and start messing around with team compositions. Some teams can be built around heavily utilizing the chain attack system for tons of damage, or you can also build groups around the status effects of break, topple, and daze. It's a simple chain, but knocks the enemy over and stops them from attacking, so group compositions can be made to lock enemies into loops and stopping them from ever hitting you, especially when paired with the chain attack system. It can be incredibly satisfying to dominate enemies and prevent them from ever even becoming a danger to begin with. But again, it gives the player the option to approach an encounter in any way they see fit. Regardless of your team though, you'll still get visions. The visions that Shulk gets through the Monado also occur during combat. Occasionally, they will warn you of a powerful ability that will occur soon. I think this is just flat out awesome. I love how this story element is integrated into the gameplay as well. I can understand some may feel it interrupts the combat a bit, but I think it's a great way of allowing the player to interact with enemies. Many abilities are pretty dangerous and can easily one-shot somebody, but instead of having a direct counter button, or maybe no interactivity at all, it is simply a warning. It is up to you to change the future. Whether you want to use an art to try to shield against it, to topple the enemy and knock them out of it, or maybe even just use a chain attack and defeat them before they can get the ability off. The game doesn't hold your hand and let you approach however you'd like. I've said it a few times already, but the strength of the gameplay loop is the simplicity. The player is allowed to interact with the systems at hand as much as they want, without being held back. It may not be flashy, but it gives the player freedom to play how they want to play. It does exactly what it needs to, and it's well crafted. I can't talk about this game without taking some time to gush about the world design. It's gorgeous, but that's no surprise. One thing that the Xenoblade series knocks out of the park every time is its stunning vistas and breathtaking landscapes. But that isn't what I want to focus on. Instead, let's look at how the world is put together. As an area is traversed, it may not be clear right away, or may be easy to forget that this land is actually the body of a Titan being. So it isn't as simple as being in a snow area, but rather it's correlated to a body part of the Titan. This drastically changes how the developers were able to approach the design of each area. Colony 9 seems a bit plain at first, but it is located on a lower leg of the Bionis. Early on, Shulk and Fiora must leave a park because there is falling debris. It's a small moment, but a great world-building moment. Being so low on the Bionis, it makes sense that stuff would fall off from higher regions, and be a danger these people need to deal with. Stuff like this makes the world feel more real and lived in, and the design of the world lends to the developers being able to make it unique. Valak Mountain, the snow area, is my favorite area in the game. Aside from ice physics, I really enjoy the aesthetics of snow and cold areas. I adore the nighttime vista, where the crystals stunningly shoot beams of light into the sky and light up the whole zone. But how did this area end up the way it is? Valak Mountain is one of the arms of the Bionis, so it's not even the highest point of the Titan. However, considering where the arm is, the body always engulfs it in shadow, preventing it from being warmed up by the sun. The fact that the land isn't just a standard continent opens up so many possibilities like this. We can go from drastically different biomes very rapidly and it still makes sense. I mean, the previous area is Magna Forest, a hot and humid rainforest with dinosaurs, and suddenly the next area is frozen. But Magna is on the back of the Bionis, encoded in sunlight, the complete opposite of Valak Mountain. So even though they are close, it all makes sense. It can enhance the wonder of journeying to a new area. You never know what wondrous stuff you'll find next. And while Valak Mountain is my favorite, a close runner-up is of course Aerith Sea. Home to the Hyentia and located on the head of the Bionis, Aerith stands out even in this crazy world. Ether, the world's natural energy, flows upward, with most of it being accumulated around the head. This causes many parts of the land to float. Much of the exploration is teleporting between these floating islands. This is such an interesting approach to an area. Not only do we have these floating islands, but the sea itself is technically floating. It's at the head of the Bionis, meaning it's being held up there. You can actually see Aerith Sea from Magna Forest, and it leads to this unbelievable view of an ocean in the sky. Again, the structure of the world is what allows them to have such crazy vistas in the first place, and I really wanted to emphasize the appreciation for that. Exploring Bionis is far more eventful and interesting than just walking across a regular continent. But it also doesn't stop there. Aerith Sea also changes a bit at nighttime. All that ether lights up the night, and it creates one of the most gorgeous areas to explore in the entire game. The flows of ether illuminate the surrounding areas and are complemented by a bright starry night sky. You will of course see the Mechonis as well. The Titan is the complete opposite in more ways than one. We travel the Bionis primarily on its surface, while we will see the Mechonis from the inside. Similarly to how we traverse the body parts of the Titan, we somewhat explore the innards of this massive machine. We don't run through valleys or scale mountains, but rather take elevators. There are tons of actively moving parts. It can come across as almost alien at some points with how advanced the machinery can be. It is definitely a highlight of the journey. Now, you might expect me to talk about the soundtrack, but I try not to talk much about audio in my videos. Music is such a subjective topic that I have a hard time putting anything into words outside of me liking it or not. Sometimes there are examples of ambient sounds that can be talked about, but if I say I like the music, it doesn't really do anything, or at least I don't feel like I'm giving anybody any useful information. So instead, I'll just sum up my thoughts of the game overall. I truly believe this game is in a league of its own. Every time I play this game, I can't help but adore the craftsmanship. Every cutscene is filled to the brim with quality. They managed to pack so much detail in very short periods of time. I am beyond impressed at how well crafted the characters are, at how well told the story is. I really appreciate the customization that was given to us in the gameplay. And it is all backed up by breathtaking vistas that make it a joy to run through each area. I honestly wish I could talk more about it, and believe me, I could talk for a long time about this game. I really do think Xenoblade Chronicles is amazing. Now before I close out the video, I would actually like to talk about the channel very quickly. I make these videos for fun, because I love discussing media, and I love trying to understand what makes things work or not. I never really expected much to come from making videos. So what else can I say other than thank you? Thank you so much. I got a ton of support after my previous video on Dying Light 2. I made a tiny video thanking everybody when I crossed that 100 subscriber mark. I didn't think that would happen. So it was stunning when the channel crossed 400 subscribers. I am blown away by this, and I can't express my thanks enough. Even if you disagree with me, I appreciate hearing me out, and I appreciate everybody watching my videos. This is all so encouraging to me. It's encouraging for me to make more videos. I would love to continue to discuss all sorts of different media and topics, and seeing this level of support out of nowhere is incredible. I still have a long way to go though. Everything I am doing is self-taught, so I ask for any and all tips and criticisms towards my future videos. I want to make them better so you can enjoy them more as well. Or if you have suggestions for anything to cover, leave them in the comments as well. That should be it for now though. Once again, thank you so very much for watching and subscribing. I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you next time.